Hello, everyone. Welcome to Connections with Shawnta Jackson. This is our opportunity as professionals to make the most out of professional networking, career growth, business growth, and also to be informed and inspired by like-minded individuals. My next guest is Alison Macklin. Alison is a 17-year national comprehensive sex ed leader. She is located in Colorado, and I originally met Alison when I was a sexual health educator for Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains in Las Vegas. It was a division of Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains. It was I think it was Planned Parenthood of Southern Nevada, yes. And so Alison, she helped to lead the education department in multiple states that covered the Rocky Mountains. And we are connected on LinkedIn. We stay connected. She is an author. She has, in addition to being a national leader, she is affiliated with SIECUS, a national organization that she'll tell us about. And also she's an independent consultant, and her consulting company is Making Sense of It Consulting. And she is also the author of the internationally published book, Making Sense of It, a guide for teens about sex and their parents too. At this time, please do welcome my guest, Alison. And also, we are streaming live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And we welcome your questions and comments in the chat box. Hey, Alison.
Hi, so good to see you.
You too. Thank you so much for joining me. And as I was telling folks as they were starting to join in, that you and we originally met when I worked for Planned Parenthood of Southern Nevada, which was a division of Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains.
Yep, that's right. And their Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains is an affiliate that serves Colorado, Wyoming, New Mexico, and then Southern Nevada.
Yes,
and I was with Planned Parenthood Rocky Mountains for almost 17 years. And started there working, as a sex educator, just like you, and then worked my way up till I was vice president of education, innovation, and HIV programs for a couple of years there. And just recently left and started my own consulting company, like you mentioned, Making Sense of It Consulting, which is based on my book that I published for teens and working with parents. And really the goal of Making Sense of It Consulting is twofold. One is to work, and it's really around systems change. So thinking about how do families talk about sex and sexuality, and thinking about it from birth until death, really, because when we think about comprehensive sex education, that's really what we're talking about, is how do we prepare ourselves to live healthy lives at all of the stages in our life. And then the other part of the work that I do is around larger system change. So thinking through how do we change education systems to support an inclusive and respectful environment to learn about these really sensitive and important topics.
Perfect. Thank you for that overview. And you mentioned comprehensive sex education from birth through death.
Mm-hmm.
Could you explain to our audience what is comprehensive sex education?
Yeah, so I think comprehensive sex education is more commonly thought of as just sex education, but it really is based on a framework of learning and ability to set foundations at a very young age, so that those foundational skills and information are able to be built on as the young person grows up. So when we think about sex education for a really young person, that's around helping them to understand what their bodies are and their body types, the body parts, and then thinking about body safety, which is really important for young kiddos to recognize that certain parts of their bodies are only for them. No one else gets to touch that. And then bodily autonomy around like hugging and not having to always hug somebody if you don't want to. And so that's around body safety, and those basic skills around which is a consent thing. So asking if somebody can hug you and saying, yes, somebody can hug me, or even to the skills around helping young people understand that you don't get to just take somebody else's toy. So somebody doesn't get to just touch you, and those are transferable skills. And then as somebody ages up and starts having more intimate relationships, dating, that they're already comfortable in talking about what they are, what and asking for, can we do this? Can I kiss you? And so that becomes really natural for them and really shapes a culture of consent and helps people to understand that however you identify, you have the right to say, yes, I do and don't want to do, whether it's sexual or, non-sexual. These are important skills, and helping to teach that when they're younger and then build on that as they developmentally mature really sets them up for a lifetime of positive communication with their partners and understanding that, and positive mental health, because really that bodily autonomy and that my body's my choice of what I want to do is so important.
Yes, especially given the growing rates of, we have child pornography, we have human trafficking, we have sex trafficking, sexual assault, with those different things, for people to be able to build those refusal skills. But then also, so the healthy relationships, the anti-bullying. In my opinion, anti-bullying fits in with comprehensive sex ed as well. So
that's right.
Right, those healthy relationships. But then also, while you were speaking, I was thinking about a story that our colleague Laura Deitch used to tell. And so the story was about this little girl who told her mother that she didn't want to go over her uncle's house because her uncle kept asking her to kiss his elbow. And the mom said, elbow, that's just, you silly girl. But the entire time the elbow was his penis. But had the mother communicated and taught her daughter her body parts, and she would have known the proper language to be able to communicate with her mother that someone was harming her.
Yeah, that's right. And unfortunately, those situations do exist. And while we definitely believe that parents are a primary and values educator, and values should be conveyed from the parents, we know that not all parents are equipped or comfortable talking about the different parts of sex education. And so really advocating for that systems change and school change is so important. We want all of our schools to be places where young people feel safe. They feel like they are able to critically think. They're able to advocate for their needs. And if we do not set up an environment that's healthy and happy for them, we know that the implications on mental health are really detrimental. So that's why I'm so passionate about this work, because just like you said, it overlies so many different areas. There's so much intersectionality, and the benefits for teaching healthy communication skills and the benefits for teaching advocacy skills, span just not even, as I was talking about earlier, not just around sex and sexuality, but it can impact how peers are comfortable declining alcohol and drug use, thinking about all sorts of different health impacts. The other thing I would say around comprehensive sex education is that it doesn't make assumptions around people. So there are people who have experienced trauma in their lives. And we know that there is historical trauma in different ethnicity groups, and comprehensive sex education takes all of that into account and helps people to think about, okay, here is, you're born into this life, and here are the skills that you can use throughout your life to make good choices for yourself. whatever realm that might be in.
And who should teach this comprehensive sex ed, in your opinion? I know you mentioned schools on the policy level, but who should teach it, and what type of training does this, or do these individuals need?
That's a really great question. So we absolutely believe that this belongs in schools because, just as the example that you gave, not all parents feel equipped. They maybe didn't receive this information. And it is such a foundational aspect of critically thinking about just your environment and your world as a human being. And so we do believe that all public education should have sex education. That should have health education generally, but we know that sometimes health education isn't top of line for schools due to a myriad of different issues. But it should be taught by people who are specifically trained to teach sex education. So we want to make sure that sex education is taught free from shame, free from stigma, and really free from ideology. And so it's the facts and it's the skills, and recognizing that there are different programs out there that teach from more of a religious ideology, which maybe isn't accepting of LGBTQ plus individuals, which it can be really harmful. And so we need to make sure that our schools are safe for all people. And we have we have Civil Rights Act that was passed at the federal level that is supposed to ensure that. And unfortunately, there are times where schools don't follow the laws of the land, or perhaps have more leeway when it comes to sex education. And so that's why it's so important to focus in on what sex education is being taught in a system. Because we need to make sure that they're in compliance and around civil rights. We need to make sure that they are supportive for all learners per our Department of Education. We, at the federal level, they say that the public school systems are there for all individuals, and that to support all learners, regardless of their ability and regardless of who they are. And so we need to work really hard as advocates in the field to make sure that the direction that's being given to schools is actually being followed. There are definitely programs out there that are misleading, that are hurtful, and they're called abstinence only until marriage programs, or also called sexual risk avoidance programs. And what it's important for people to understand is that those types of programs aren't inclusive. They are teaching a certain ideology. They are often criminalizing homosexuality, and they are often not taught in a way that empowers individuals to make the decisions that they need for their life. Again, they're usually not trauma informed, so don't take into account that maybe somebody's first sexual encounter wasn't their choice. And we can't make any sort of assumptions about classrooms. We don't know who the young people are in our classrooms. We don't know what their backgrounds are. We don't know what their family lives are. So that's why the public education system is so important to provide factual information and provide information that's free from stigma and shame. We need to embrace young people where they are and help support them to achieve their goals, whatever those goals may be. And so when looking at curriculum, that's really important. And it's also really important to think through that framework of younger students getting foundational components of what's called sex education. I think it should be called personal safety, honestly, because there's really not a whole lot of sex education that happens. When we think of sex education, we think of a penis to vagina sex, the actual act of sex, and there's so much more around sexual health education. We know that a young person's gender identity is pretty intact by the age of 3. So that means young people who maybe were born and gendered as female might be coming into a kindergarten classroom not identifying as a female. And so we need to make sure that that kindergarten classroom is a safe place for all of those students to learn and help and provide, and sex education does that.
Okay. Again, thank you for that great explanation. And so we talked about the schools. At one point, there was a big push on the federal level through the Office of Adolescent Health. There was teen pregnancy prevention and HIV risk reduction funding that went out to multiple states and U.S. territories for, I believe it was a 5 to 7 year, it could have been longer period. Now, based off, and that was in around 2009, starting around that time. And so now in 2021, where, in your opinion, for that big push, where are we now in 2021? And what do you think needs to happen, not just on the school level, but also on some of the state and local levels?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. So yes, I mean, I think unfortunately, sex education is highly politicized. So regardless of experts the American Medical Association, Pediatric Association, these individuals 100% support sex education, comprehensive sex education. So despite experts in psychology and child development and sexual health saying this is the right way to go, it has unfortunately become politicized. And so over the years, various amounts of federal monies have been put into these types of programs to help schools and to help train teachers. And unfortunately, based on whomever is in the White House, it has become more of a partisan issue, more than it really should, because we know that 96% of parents want this education, regardless of political affiliation. They want their young people to have this education. Unfortunately, due to some more extreme groups there that want a certain Christian ideology taught in schools, this has become highly politicized. And so it really is up to parents to understand what is going on in their schools, what's going on in their school districts, what is being taught at the curriculum level. And while most states have health curriculum, health standards that they have determined, and it incorporates certain components of sex education. We hear a lot about vocal opposition, and we have to recognize that that is a very well-funded, small minority of individuals. For the most, like I said, 96% of parents think that sex education should be taught. And you can't even get 96% of parents to agree on an ice cream flavor, more or less a curriculum. So we know that this is what needs to be done. We need to be strong as parents to help advocate for that change and look at who is running for school district positions, to get involved in those types of elections, and to get involved in their young person's learning. Because like I said, there are insidious forces that are looking to change that and really force an ideology in the classroom. And that's not what public education is about.
And thank you for that. And for the 96%, the stat that you mentioned, where is that source?
I can pull it up for you. I have to get it, but it's from polling data that was done a couple of years ago, regardless of political affiliation. So sometimes polling data is a little bit skewed, but this is the largest polling that has ever been done on the subject matter.
Okay, no, so that's good enough. No, I just wanted folks to know, so just in case they wanted to research it for themselves. And,
sure.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that. For my graduate project, in Southern Nevada, I administered a survey to parents of African American students of the Clark County School District to learn their desires for sex education within the school district. And when I gave them the definition of abstinence only, abstinence based until marriage, and comprehensive sex ed, they still chose abstinence and abstinence only until marriage. You said, what type of sex education would you like for your child to have? But the remainder of the survey, there were individual questions. Do you want your child to learn about birth control? Do you want your child to learn about this subject? Do you want your child to learn about this? Who should teach this? And once you broke it down per individual questions, even though if we went by those 3 responses only, the majority did not say comprehensive sex ed.
Yeah.
At the end of the survey, their actual questions indicated that they do want comprehensive sex education. It's just that sometimes parents and caregivers are a little confused about the titles and the definitions, and sometimes just the psyche. You want your child to be abstinent. And so it was more so a desire that it seems like as if they were responding to. So it is interesting that you say, and I actually do believe that the majority of parents do want, once we start breaking it down and talking to parents, I think that they all do want comprehensive sex education. Of course, there are some parents that don't, and they have the right. A lot of parents don't, but I don't think it's a majority of parents.
Yeah, you're right. I think that these terms like comprehensive, abstinence only till marriage, sexual risk avoidance. I mean, at the surface, like I want sexual risk avoidance for my own child, right? Like I don't want them to be engaging in risky behavior. So I think the opposition has been really skilled at kind of taking keywords that resonate and to recognize that that's kind of part of their game. But comprehensive sex education 100% talks about abstinence. Abstinence is a safe option and the safest option for young people. But we also know that not everyone has that option. Maybe they were forced into a situation beyond their control. Maybe they are in a really healthy relationship and they're ready. So it's really about making sure that the information is available and that it's factual information. Because I think the other piece that people aren't aware of is that some of these programs that are called sexual risk avoidance or abstinence only until marriage really do, besides forcing a certain ideology, they also give incorrect information. So the research is showing that young people who get those types of curriculum aren't using condoms because they've been told that condoms aren't effective, when we know that that's just not true. That condoms are extremely effective at helping to prevent not only pregnancy, but also STIs. And so when we look at the damage, not only from thinking about from the public health perspective of disease prevention and pregnancy prevention, but also a damage, and people can look up these types of videos where we have these programs who liken women who are engaged in sexual activity as dirty chewed gum or dirty tape and used. And those types of labels and that type of shame-based education has shown, regardless of what field, whether it's drug prevention or sexual activity, is shown to be ineffective. So from a public health perspective, how do we change behaviors and how do we help empower young people to be healthy and to make good decisions? We have to give them factual information. We have to help them with some of these foundational skills really early on around communication, around advocacy and bodily autonomy, and then build on that. So then when somebody is ready to become intimate with their partner, whether that's at 16 or 32, they know where to find the right information. They know how to access how to protect themselves, and they know how to have that a positive conversation with people in their lives around their choices that they're making.
Okay, and you mentioned public health a few times, and so I do have a question for you as it relates to public health and the social determinants of health. But before we do, we have a question in the chat box from In Your Ear Radio in Las Vegas. And hi, I just hopped on, but have you addressed sex ed in regards to gender, homosexuality, and ways to have sex? I hear they're teaching this now in public schools.
That's a great question. So we did talk about it a little bit, but yes, so we talk about gender identity, we talk about LGBTQ rights, we talk about, and then as a young person is older, we definitely will talk about the different types of sex that a person can engage in. And then recognizing that there is also, along with that, educators don't go into graphic detail around sexual behaviors, but they do want to ensure that people understand that a mouth to penis, for example, is a type of sexual behavior, and that type of behavior can have risk factors involved with it. So how does one need to protect themselves so that they don't get a disease, so that they can decide whether or not that's a behavior that they want to engage in, and they feel and they're aware of what that is.
Thank you for addressing that, Alison. And so, public health. I know in the past for engaging and informing stakeholders with teen pregnancy prevention, we would talk about the economic impact of teen pregnancy. So, for example, a teen parent is first of all, the body is not as developed sometimes, depending on the age or the progression of growth for the girl. Her body may not be able to carry. And so there could be complications with pregnancy and birth. And so now we're dealing with infant mortality. And then teen parents, is not to say that it's impossible, but teen parents are less likely to graduate from high school, and if you're less likely to graduate from high school, you're more likely to be dependent upon public assistance. So again, I'm talking about the economic impact, right? And why sex education, comprehensive sex education, is important in schools and for teens. And then just the medical costs with the insurance, and then that child and their child, and kind of going through the lifespan. And teen parents, not all again, but some teen parents, they're more likely to become a teen parent again, or to have a child again at an early age. And so this affects all of us, whether or not we have children or not, right? Just as citizens, as a society. And then the foster care systems and the mental health and different systems like that are impacted. And so that was our perspective on why it was important for sex education and the prevention of teen pregnancy. But do you have anything to add about the importance of sex education just in general for society, and how sex education, or what is the connection between sex education and what we refer to as the social determinants of health?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So I think the one thing is that you can be the one thing to keep in mind is that when we talk about teen pregnancy, a teenager may not even be in high school any longer. So they could 18, 19, those are still considered teens. So I think that's one thing. I just want to put that caveat out there. And then I think, just as you said, there are absolutely teen parents who are very successful and able to achieve their dreams and goals for life. And I think that we have to, like I said, we can't make assumptions when we're going into a classroom that somebody has been, someone is is or is not parenting, whether or not they've had an abortion, whether or not they have had sexual activity. And so that's why comprehensive sex education is so important, because again, it takes away that shame, the shame that I think as a society in the United States has not always been favorable to teen parents. So that's one aspect. I think the other thing I want to call out is that I do a lot of consulting, and I'm the senior policy advisor at SIECUS. And SIECUS is the tagline is sex ed for social change. And that's because we know that comprehensive sex education, the foundational skills that are taught in sex education, are critical to leading healthy lives. And so if young people are empowered, if young people are taught communication skills, if young people are taught to understand what a healthy relationship looks like, then, and that happens early on, then throughout their life, they are going to be set up for more success. So those social determinants, the other aspects of violence, when we think about intimate partner violence, we can then make an impact and in reducing those other spheres, because really who you are as a sexual being, it's so ingrained in us, right? Like when you're pregnant, when a person is pregnant, the first thing people ask are you going to find out what the gender is? Are you going to, or what are you having? Are you having a boy or a girl? And so from the offset in our minds as human beings, we sexualize children in that way. And so we're ascribing a certain, we're ascribing gender, we're ascribing certain, whatever my bias is, my implicit bias around that gender. And then it goes into thinking about what bathroom you use. And so for a lot of people, it's not a big deal. It's something they don't really have to think about. But we also know that there is a huge amount of individuals who going to the bathroom is challenging, deciding which one they're going to be safe in, or not feeling safe in their own skin because they've been told that they're a boy and they don't feel like they're a boy. They feel like they're a girl, or they're attracted to somebody who they're being told is not the person they're supposed to be attracted to. And so those components of sexuality, they have nothing to do with the actual act of sex. It is kind of a core part of who you are as a human being. And so that is why I'm so passionate about comprehensive sex education. I think it's wrong that any child should grow up in a system where they're being told that they're bad for something that they don't even know about or understand or control. And so I think that is why, so when we look at mental health, for example, comprehensive sex education, when it's being taught and when concepts of gender identity, concepts of sexual orientation are being taught, we know that LGBTQ individuals are able to feel more supported. They feel, and that their social emotional well-being is much greater for everyone. So when we think about if you're a woman and you have a female body and that's how you identify, comprehensive sex education dispels the stereotypes, dispels gender roles, and really helps people to see, oh, I just because I'm a woman doesn't mean I can't do other things. So it breaks down those types of stereotypes that I think are really still very prominent. We know that Kamala Harris was the first female vice president, and that's over 200 years since the founding of the United States. And yet those types of gender stereotypes have been overcome in other countries that do do use comprehensive sex education. So the concepts of sexuality are so far-reaching that when we provide this type of education, we're able to make lifelong, big, huge impacts in so many different areas. And I think mental health is really one that we have to consider, especially coming out of COVID.
Yes, thank you. And I agree with you. Mental health and also under the sphere of mental health, suicide prevention as well. Yes, so I thank you for that. And we are at time. Alison, thank you so much for this very engaging and informative chat. Everyone, if you are interested in connecting with Alison, you can contact her you can visit her website, makingsenseofitconsulting.com. Also, her book, if it's available online wherever books are sold. I know in particular, I found it on Amazon. So Making Sense of It, it's a, well, why don't you tell us the title? Because I think I botched the title of your book.
You actually did great. So it's Making Sense of It. It's sex education for teens and their parents too. And the idea behind the book is really for more high school age students to read either with their parent or with, they could read it and then their parent can read it. But there are discussion questions because I think as we touched on earlier, young people want to hear this information from their parents, but parents don't always know what the information should be. So this book is a great tool for both.
Thank you. And then also, everyone, you can connect with Alison on LinkedIn. Her name is Alison Macklin. And as always, you can also connect with me on LinkedIn at Shawnta Jackson MPH. And if you'd like to learn more about me, visit my personal website, shawntajackson.com. And if you'd like to learn more about my company, Cause Engagement Associates, please do visit causeengagement.com. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll see you next Wednesday.